Guys, I know we've been hitting you with a lot of videos in regards to interviews. We covered the Firing Range podcast the other day that touched on a lot of changes coming next season, spoken from Eric Smith and Mercules. Today, though, we're going to be breaking down the Destiny Massive Breakdowns podcast versus Enemies, episode 63, with Chris Proctor, who is the senior design lead and weapons feature lead, as well as Rodney Thompson, senior design lead and armor Buildcrafting design lead. So lots of juicy information, and we'll have links to those podcasts as well as their Twitters if you want to check them out. Now at 16 minutes and 50 seconds, when asked about Buildcrafting 2.0, Bungie feels really good about Buildcrafting currently, now that it's been out in the wild for a few months, and they can see where improvements can be made, and they're always tinkering with new ideas and ways to refine and iterate on things from here. And they're seeing lots of more people sink their teeth into Buildcrafting than ever before, now that it's easier to understand and it's more easily accessible. Now I think there's a lot of things that's contributing to this. Number one, saving the loadouts in game is huge, and number two, the consolidation of Charged with Light and Elemental Wells. That's essentially what Buildcrafting 2.0 is. Now at 22 minutes, it was stated that Bungie began working on reticle changes back in season 19, when they actually updated pellet spreads. This gave them the idea to add things to reticles to provide more information based on the weapon that you're using. And guys, this is a small subtle thing that maybe some of you may not even notice, but it's these quality of life changes that we absolutely needed. We saw from the TWAB there where Ace of Spades, when you have Memento Mori, you literally can see the dots underneath the reticle, showing you how many Memento Mori shots you have. Now, Chris Proctor said that these reticle changes might eventually help relieve some of the busyness from the bottom left status buff in debuff UI, but they are aware of how overcrowded the buff area gets, and they do have massive adjustments coming to that several seasons down the line. Way too early to drop specifics on those changes. I will say this, guys, and I'm gonna just leave this here. One of the best things that I feel like MMORPGs do, especially Final Fantasy 14 A Realm Reborn, is they allow you to customize your UI. And I think we are getting to that point where we need that ability in Destiny. If you want to put your super bar at the top of your screen, go right ahead. If you want to place your chat completely out of sight, or your status effects stacked from top to bottom on one side of the screen or the other, I think we need the freedom to do so. We need the ability to fully customize our UI. That is a huge change here, guys, if that could happen. And then not only that, but similar to Dim, if we can save our UIs and then share it with people, can you imagine? And keep in mind, for things like Final Fantasy, I would have different UIs depending on the activity that I was doing. If I was playing PvP, my UI was completely different than my PvE. Or if I was gathering or crafting, with the click of a button, I would change my UI substantially so, depending on what I was actually doing. And I know, people like Cross, but that's Final Fantasy. It's an MMORPG. Look, we are heading in that direction, and I am sick and tired of looking at the bottom left end of my screen wondering which effects are currently active, because I can only hold 4 at a time. In my opinion, don't try to fix this by just doubling that screen. Go the extra mile and give us fully customizable UIs that will carry for years to come in Destiny. Now at 25 minutes and 52 seconds, it was stated on top of the season 20 rapid fire reserves buffs and the upcoming damage buff to sniper rifles, Chris Proctor thinks that this will bring sniper rifles back into the fold a good bit more, but they're trying to slowly adjust snipers because it's very easy to buff them too much. Now it's stated that in the future, if snipers still need a buff, they'll likely give them more of a damage buff and make them harder to use. Now it was stated that Whisper and Darcy aren't being used too much, although Chris did say that the 10% buff to sniper damage will put Whisper above linear fusions for DPS, and he thinks that it's going to perform well in season 21. Here's the thing, a lot of people don't realize it, but Whisper has like the best total damage in the game. It has great ammo conservation, it has consistent DPS, it's not heavily ammo dependent. I'm curious to see how this shakes out. The only issue with Whisper is you have to be perfect. You have to land those crits. So that's the problem. It's very unforgiving. With that being said though, they did state that they're looking at a much bigger change for Whisper that's still several seasons away. Now Darcy, on the other hand, they want to wait and see what it looks like in season 21 since it's a rapid fire. So it's benefiting from the reserve buff and the recoil reduction. Now they know people keep saying to just make it a special weapon, but they don't think that will really solve the problem, as it'll just be competing with things like Cloud Strike. And they're determined to make Darcy actually work as a heavy sniper. Here's the thing, we did DPS checks after the rapid fire buffs, and let me just say, Darcy is still quite ass. I'm just being real with you guys. Cloud Strike is just better, and it's a special weapon. Hence why people do say things like, hey, Darcy should be a special weapon. The damage between Darcy and Cloud Strike is actually similar. Now, at 31 minutes and 15 seconds, Chris says to watch out for a new rocket launcher perk called Bipod, and that we should look forward to seeing it on a few rocket launchers. And quote, maybe a raid one. This, of course, is hinting at the next reprise raid. I think a lot of us are speculating later this summer that the reprise raid will be Wrath of the Machine. And if that's the case, then be looking for the Sound and Fury rocket launcher to roll with Bipod. Now, if it's not Wrath, and maybe it's just an update to Last Wish or even Leviathan, then of course you have things like Apex Predator, Sins of the Past. Again, I hope it's Wrath of the Machine. I would love to see Sound and Fury back in the game. Now, at 33 minutes and 50 seconds, Sweet Business's Explosive Round update that is getting next season will visually look like Explosive Payload. But unlike Explosive Payload, it's additional damage and does a higher percentage of damage in a larger radius. Quote, like Explosive Payload, but stronger and not every bullet. And this is from Chris here, guys. Gives you kind of an idea. Again, you're not getting Explosive Payload every single shot. So obviously, on that 20th shot, it's gonna need to be something substantial. Now, at 34 minutes and 35 seconds, Bungie sees Legend of Acrius being a strong option in the future. Thanks to the buffs it's getting to ammo economy and range next season. But they see it being especially strong in the future because shotgun perks will be on the artifact soon. Now, we already saw the artifact perks coming next season, so I'm assuming maybe like next season after this coming up season. Regardless though, no backup plans is getting a substantial buff. And we said it already, 2 shotguns to be looking out for that are gonna pair very nicely with it includes Legend of Acrius, as well as Conditional Finality. Now, when asked on how they see it comparing to things like exotic swords in the future, Chris says that they actually are reworking swords for a future release that's going to shake up close quarter combat quite a bit, but not much to say on that yet. But did confirm Legend of Acrius will work with no backup plans rework. By the way, we have a video breaking down Titan builds to be looking out for next season. Feel free to check that out. With that being said, yes, Bungie has already confirmed multiple times we're going to be seeing a huge rework to swords, meaning this season, guys, you may want to start locking down some God roll swords. I know it's been a long time since the day of Yawing with Crown Spitter, but I believe that time again is quickly approaching. Now, at 36 minutes and 25 seconds, the same designers that worked on the Verglass Curved Exotic Bow are also the ones that did Salvation's Grip rework, which is why you can see some similarities there. And they've been wanting to rework it for a while, but because of how it works, they knew it would take a lot of time, and they finally got around to it. Yeah, guys, earlier this week, we actually saw that Salvation's Grip is getting a rework, and it's actually interesting. It's gonna perform like a grenade launcher and essentially have 2 different functions. I'm excited to see where it shakes out. Keep in mind, shatter damage is a strange animal. We did our super damage testing the other day, and the #1 super in the game right now, in terms of sheer total damage, is Behemoth. It's just shatter damage over and over, stacking those crystals one on top of another. So it makes me wonder, could we even amplify this more if we were to use Salvation's Grip and then pop our supers, adding more crystals here to our total damage? Now, at 37 minutes and 25 seconds, Reconstruction will be rolling on a bunch of in-game weapons in the future, but Chris says to watch out for a rocket launcher that can roll with both Reconstruction and Bipod, and states, quote, it's ridiculous. Now, Reconstruction was asked about because of the changes below that were announced in the Season 21 Weapons Change blog post, and stated that Reconstruction has been simplified under the hood so that when we place the perk on more weapons, you won't be exceeding perk budgets. Now, the results are going to be a slight change to the timing of the perk. Again, all they're really doing is consolidating. It's the same timing for both the reload function and the overload function. Base perk being 4 seconds, enhanced being 3.5 seconds. I do not think this is a tremendous change. More or less, Bungie's way of simplifying it versus having 2 different timers for essentially the same function. Now, in 38 minutes, Graviton Lance is apparently really fun in PvP after the changes it's getting. And again, this could be substantial here, guys. They're increasing the rounds per minute from 257 to 300, but they're reducing the burst delay by 20%, essentially matching Revision Zero's hockey heavy burst rate of fire. They're also rebalancing the damage here. Instead of the first shot being just a small amount of damage and the second shot being, 70-75% of the total damage, they're kind of trying to get to that 50-50 mark, but not quite. The second shot is still going to do more damage. With that being said, though, I'm curious to see where Graviton Lance sits, and the fact that they're calling it out inside of PvP, well, we could have a Graviton Lance meta. And before somebody says, but Cross, Revision 0 and its 2-round burst doesn't feel that good inside of PvP. I'll say that Graviton Lance, its 2-round burst mode, is substantially better because the shots are so consolidated. Yes, you kind of get that out of Revision 0, but shooting Graviton Lance 2-round burst mode feels really good. And with the RPM increase, I'm curious to see how this plays out. Now, 41 minutes and 50 seconds, when asked about whether or not we could see exotics in the future that dip into all subclasses like Chromatic Fire and maybe something for Titan, Rodney stated that it's certainly a possibility and that the mindset they tend to keep for exotics that utilize all subclasses is that those exotics will typically be simple and easy to understand, whereas exotics that focus on specific subclasses are more likely to have depth or new gameplay mechanics tied to them, making them feel unique within the subclass fantasy that they're a part of, which makes sense. At 45 minutes and 30 seconds, Bungie stated that Mask of the Quiet One is a priority to Bungie. Thank God. Now, they also said that there's a number of other exotics that are on that priority list, so be looking for updates to more in the future. At 48 minutes and 55 seconds, it was stated that Khepri's Horn Scorch stacks only apply once. So if the wave hits an enemy as it goes out, it'll apply Scorch stacks. If it hits that same enemy on its way back, it won't apply another set of Scorch. Now, Rodney thinks the Scorch stacks are similar to that of Caliban's Hand, which is 60 stacks. I guess the question for you guys, should Khepri's Horn apply both Scorch on the way out and on the way back? And if it's applying 60, guys, yes, that would be an immediate ignition. Now, at an hour and 5 minutes, the damage stacking philosophy got brought up. Bungie stated they want to be wary of damage bonuses that stack with each other because they feel like it not only affects balancing, but also makes build crafting sometimes feel static, where no matter what, you always want to be equipping mods that stack with damage bonuses that you're already getting from a certain exotic or what have you. They're hoping the changes to exotics like Path of Burning Steps and Eternal Warrior will give players more choices as to what they slot in their leg armor instead of always just using surge mods, solely because they would stack on more damage. Again, what Bungie's trying to move away from is exotics that grant you damage buffs stacking with surge mods. And yes, I would say the popularity for surge mods has been the go-to pretty much for everything, especially damage phases, right? Now, at an hour and 16 minutes, on the topic of combining exotics that kind of overlap, for example, combining Raju's Harness and Blight Ranger, Rodney says it's not necessarily off the table. The issue with doing that is, let's say they move Blight Ranger's perk to Raju's Harness. Now they have Blight Ranger that has nothing, which is fine. It's like making a new exotic at that point, but they would want to keep the same fantasy or theme for it, which is the same mantra they have for reworking exotics. Because what if someone spent time getting a role they want for said exotic, and then all of a sudden the entire fantasy of it changes? They don't want exotics to become unrecognizable to players who may have invested in them. So Blight Ranger would have to keep the same theme, but Raju's Harness basically took its perk and therefore fantasy, so they'd have to come up with something new but also similar for Blight Ranger. So combining similar exotics is possible in the future, but there's a lot more that goes into it versus just putting two together and calling it a day. Now, we did damage testing here recently. Raju's Harness, again, its ability to block, its conservation, that's its strength. Whereas Blight Ranger, its ability to block and produce decent damage. I mean, it was actually impressive how much damage I was getting here with Blight Ranger. It definitely outperforms Raju's Harness, although it doesn't last as long. Now, with that being said though, they are two exotics that pretty much do the exact same thing. They're definitely both requiring you to rely on rolling guard. My suggestion would be, on the note of like Blight Ranger, is as you are blocking more damage, you create a super shot that you can deploy. Like for instance, a wyvern approaches me. I'm blocking the damage. I'm blowing those shots back into the wyvern, and to say I kill that wyvern based on all that damage that I just blocked. Suddenly, I now have just accumulated a super shot with Whirlwind Guard, and I can actually direct it toward the next wyvern, and because it's the same damage that took out the original wyvern that I was blocking with, I now eject a super shot at that next wyvern, taking them out. I don't know, you guys let me know. That's kind of the fantasy that I see there. Now, there was a fan Q&A at an hour and 28 minutes. Exotic catalysts are designed alongside their associated exotic if they're shipping them at the same time or close to each other. But Bungie did state that there are no plans for catalysts for collective obligation or conditional finality, but they do have ideas for them, so they're certainly not off the table. Now, at an hour and 32 minutes, do the devs believe the Adept enhancing system for Root of Nightmares Adept weapons has been a success? And could this be expanded in the future to GMs or even trials? Additionally, any update to multiple perks per slot lot on craftable weapons. Now, number one, they are happy with how raid adepts have worked out and have been perceived besides the initial confusion before they shipped, most notably the masterwork. Now, they say in the future, the system may look a bit different for other raid adepts, and the system is like this because the base weapons are also craftable. Now, long-term plans for several seasons down the line is for every weapon that can't be crafted to be enhanceable, which is crazy, guys. That includes raw drops, raid weapons, dungeon weapons, etc. Again, let me repeat that. Long-term plan for several seasons down the line is for every weapon that can't be crafted to be enhanceable. It's gonna let that sink in for a second. Now, they also want to keep certain aspects of enhancing unique to raid weapons, such as modifying barrels and magazines, and their long-term plan is for multiple perks in a column to be enhanced on weapons that can be enhanced. So right now, just raid weapons, but different story for normal craftable weapons, and no current plans and timeline for getting multiple crafted perks per column. Quote, it's a very different problem space that is more complex. So guys, that is our breakdown for the Destiny Massive Breakdowns podcast versus enemies. Feel free to check out all of their socials. Great questions. Gave us lots of insights. Wonderful questions from the audience there. If you want to check out the full podcast, again, links down below. Chris and Rodney go into lots of details and how their teams work at Bungie, how closely they're bouncing ideas back and forth, also their design philosophies, and then Rodney's story on how he got into gaming development. It's a really good listen, fellas, so feel free to check that out. With that being said, we will be live streaming all of this stuff next week. Come by our Twitch, guys. We will be hitting the new season fast and hard on Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll be going underwater. That's no joke, by the way, guys. We're supposed to be going underwater this season, like straight up scuba diving or something along those lines. But we'll be hitting that as well as the new dungeon on Friday, guys, and I would love for y'all to join us. Also, the new launch of an emblem will be going live next Sunday. Essentially, when you gift 2 subs, you'll be able to get this emblem in the game. I stated the other day that I thought that it would actually activate retroactively if you gifted 2 subs. Pretty sure that's not the case. So again, hold your gifted subs. If you're looking to drop 2 gifted on our channel or anyone else's channel, wait till Sunday, then gift the subs, and you should unlock this emblem. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.